Today we're talking to our state's newest lawmakers on the eve of their first legislative session. That's next on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstadt, Cashman Equipment, DeCastro Verde Law Group, Nevada State Bank, Valley Electric Association, and additional supporting sponsors.
Welcome to Nevada Week. I'm Kip Ortenberger, and thank you for joining us today. And Nevada Week is a show for us to help inform and connect us to the issues that are critical to Nevada's future. Now, in November, we elected 13 new state assembly and Senate members. Now, just 2 months later, they're poised to become our freshman class of lawmakers in the upcoming 80th legislative session. The question is, what might their fresh perspectives teach us about Nevada's legislative process and priorities? Well, that's what we're talking about today. And joining us, we have a great panel of freshman assembly members representing districts across Southern Nevada. We have Assemblywoman Shay Bacchus, representing District 37, Assemblywoman Melissa Hardy, representing District 22, Assemblyman Glenn Levitt, representing District 23, and Assemblyman Howard Watts, representing District 15. We're very, very honored to have you all here. Thank you so much. Assemblyman Watts, I want to start with you.
Sure. Let's
talk a little bit about the Assembly and its role in the larger lawmaking process that the state has.
Sure. Thanks, Kip. Thanks for having us. So the Nevada Legislature sets the budget for the state. That includes education, both K through 12 and higher ed, as well as a lot of our healthcare services and social services in the state. We also handle a variety of topics from transportation to energy, water and natural resources, what's a crime and what the punishments are for those, and the list goes on and on. So the Assembly is one half of the legislature, the other half being the state Senate. And in that respect, a lot of times people say it's similar to the Nevada version of Congress, but I think unlike Washington, D.C., where there's a lot of gridlock and a lot of kind of partisan tension, I think here in Nevada, everyone is working together to try and do things that move the state forward. And so I think that we work a lot better here in the state of Nevada than things are going up in Washington, D.C. right now.
And why do you think that is? I'll open this up to the entire panel. Why does the Assembly work better than, say, what we're seeing in Congress right now?
Well, I like to say that one reason I think is that it is a citizen legislature. We're not full-time legislators. This isn't our full-time job. We're elected by people that are very similar to us, that have families and businesses, and we're very closely connected to the community. We're very accessible. Our constituents can get a hold of us. They can be involved in the legislative process. And we have the advantage of working closely with our colleagues and getting to know them well as we go through the process. So I think that's very unique to Nevada.
And I know in a lot of times, even around this table, that even your professional lives mix and intermingle, correct? Yeah.
It does. Can I add on to Melissa's thing?
Please.
One thing I think is really important that I think a lot of people don't know, and it's newer to the new freshman legislators, they didn't have this years ago, is we go through an intensive training program. And so it enabled us to get to know our colleagues on the other side of the aisle that are also freshmen. And it has allowed us to get to know one another and become friendly ahead of session starting.
Assemblyman Levitt, let's talk more about that. What exactly is the orientation process? Who is organizing that? Who's leading that? And what exactly do you do?
So it's a great program. The Legislative Council Bureau puts together a program. We go up to 3 sessions. We go up to Carson City twice, and we do a session down here in the South once. And it's 2.5 days, and they walk us through the process. A lot of us are very new at this process, so we want to know, they even showed us a video, the old PBS video, how a bill becomes a law. Not a little more advanced than that, but it really helps us not only not only get involved in what we're going to be doing, but step out and get to know our colleagues and really make meaningful connections. Like we spent so much time together in such a small, isolated area that we can't help but get to know each other a lot better than we would normally. And I think that's probably missing a little bit from Washington. They don't have that camaraderie that we have. And like I told you before, I know when Howard's going to start cheating at poker, you know, and so it's I think that's a very effective way to teach us and to get us into it, so we can learn the process before we learn the policy side of it, and before we start that debate.
Now, is that orientation just for freshmen Assembly and Senate, or is there a mentorship program? Is there a way that you have more seasoned Assembly members and Senate members that are integrating into that, or is it just the new?
They don't have a formal mentoring program. They do have sessions where they have former legislators come and talk to us and give us advice and tips of how to be a good legislator. They also have legislators that were freshmen in the last session come and, again, give us some pointers. And I know personally, and I'm sure my colleagues here, had people reach out to them, senators and assemblymen, and help them through the process over these months. You know, how do you do a BDR? How do you submit that? How do you research ideas for BDRs? So I think we're very lucky that we have a lot of resources to reach out to and help us through that process, people to talk to, and what it's really going to be like for the next 120 days.
And BDR is a bill draft request, right? We'll be talking
Correct.
more about that in a
Yes.
second. Yeah, Great. Also, you have a family history of being in legislation at the state level. So how's that helped you personally prepare yourself?
Yeah, it's been wonderful. My dad served in the Nevada State Assembly and the Senate, and my mom also worked for U.S. Senator Paul Laxalt. So I do have that history. And growing up, it was always our focus not to be political, but just to be aware of our civic duty and serving our community, giving back to our community, and being aware that at some point in our life, you know, we may be asked to step up to the plate and give back and serve. So it's been really nice for me to be able to call my dad and say, you know, what do you think of this? Or what would you do? Or what did you do? And have that strong, steady voice of calm wisdom talk you through things, or just get his experience. And I'll say, the one thing that he continually says is build relationships. The most important thing you can do is build relationships, not just with your colleagues here in Clark County, but up north, in the rurals, and not just with Republicans. You know, they're pretty much your friends already, but you need to cultivate those relationships with people across the aisle. It's the most important thing that you can do.
And Assemblyman Watts, related to partnership building, can you give some background of how you got into Assembly, how you got interested in becoming an Assembly member, and potentially what kind of mentorship you had?
Sure, yeah. So I was born and raised here in Las Vegas, and in high school I just really got interested in community service and giving back. And so I did a lot of volunteer work, and very early on kind of started a career in the nonprofit sector, doing both kind of that community service aspect as well as advocacy. And that's where I started to get familiar with kind of the policy-making process and the role that members of the community could play. And that's when I really first started getting interested in the legislature. And so I worked in advocacy for a while. For the last few years, I've done some public relations consulting and started my own business. And I've never lost that interest in the policy-making process. And so when the opportunity came up for me to run and serve, I threw my hat in, and I'm just honored to be here. So.
And let's talk about the transition. We've already talked a little bit about orientation and mentorships and things like that, but when you go from campaigning to being elected and now you're planning for legislation, you've engaged I would assume you've engaged your community and you've engaged your constituents differently when you are campaigning to when you are now planning. How do you re-engage your community? How do you re-engage your constituency to kind of set your agenda in legislation? And
I'm happy to
Assemblywoman
answer
Baucus,
that.
Yes.
It's interesting because I came from a little different background than Assemblyman Watts in deciding to run for office. Never thought I would go into politics. I've been an attorney for 15 and a half years and decided to make a run in 2016 and actually had a competitive primary. And so I started knocking on doors in my community back in, I guess, March of last year. And I was able to go, obviously, to Democrats in the primary and reach out to them and kind of gain from the door. And I'm in an interesting district because I have a majority of individuals over the age of 55, wherein I have Sun City, Summerlin in my district, and we go out into the northwest part of the community, Lone Mountain, Durango, and then a little over the 95. And so I started early talking to, obviously, I'm a Democrat, like-minded folks as to what the issues are. Surprisingly, learned that education was a big interest in Sun City, and then also throughout my community where you have families that have kids in school as well. And then during the general, being out in the community, knocking on doors and finding what people are interested in. It seemed this year the big topics were education and healthcare. And then stemming from after you win the election for me, I was in a very tight race, didn't think I was going to pull off a big W, and I did. And so now I'm back to re-engaging. And so I've made myself available. I did at the door. When I knocked on doors, the first thing I would say when I would hand my card is, my personal cell phone number is on every piece of literature I'm sending you. Feel free to call me, reach out to me if you have a concern. And even though my piece of literature probably went to over 20,000 people, I've only gotten a handful of calls. And they're people that are really concerned about issues, and it's nice. I keep a running tab of those issues. And as now that I've won the election, I'm now still engaging, going and speaking to communities. Last night I spoke actually at an event at one of the temples that is right outside of my district. And then likewise, I've already spoke again at Sun City, Summerlin. So I'm really trying to stay in tune with my constituents because I want to be a true representative.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, Assemblyman Levitt. You know, how can your public engage with you? Because our assembly is different and there is more of a personal relationship. How do you recommend, is it just a phone call, an email directly to you and you respond? What kind of contact, how intimate of contact do you have with your constituents?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I get a lot of emails, not too many phone calls, even though, like Assemblywoman Bex, I gave my card out with my cell phone number on it, and a lot of people thought, maybe that's not a great idea, and I'm like, well, I'm in this, so let's do it. And so I haven't gotten too many phone calls, but a lot of emails, and some of the relationships that I've built throughout the campaign, I get a lot of emails from them. I get invites to do certain things in their community, and I think the key to it, both before and after the election, is just to be present, to be present in as many things as you can, even though sometimes you're exhausted, and we all work a full-time job, and so you have to go to an event at 7 o'clock at night, even though you should probably be home helping your kids with schoolwork. But we go and we talk to them, and I can't tell you. I went to an event the other night, and after the event, there was a lot of people that wanted to discuss issues that were important to them, and I think my ride was about to leave me because they're like, we're ready to go, and people are still talking, and I think that as long as we can stay connected to that community, and it's a little easier for us than it would be on a national level. It's a little harder for me because my district extends from Inspirata to Laughlin, so it's a little more difficult. But I made 5 trips down to Laughlin, and not all of those trips were before the election, because I want to stay connected with all the constituents out there, because that's why I'm here. Like, we wouldn't do this if we didn't want to be connected to them. And so my thoughts is, please use that cell phone number. Call us. Send us emails. If we don't respond as quickly as you want, call us and leave us an angry voicemail or whatever it is. But I think we're all pretty good at getting back to our constituents, even if we don't have, a great answer for them, just if we have the answer that we're responding to their request.
So I want to move on and talk a little bit about preparation for your first legislative session. What are some of the requirements of you as freshman assembly members? Sure. And let's talk about the bill draft requests, the BDRs as we call them. What are the requirements related to those?
Sure, I'll start off. So as freshman assembly members, we get 5 bill draft requests that we had to submit in early December. So basically within a month after the election, we have to send ideas for legislation that we want to work on. And after we submit those, you don't have to use them all. After we submit those are going to be drafted into actual policy that we can review, make changes to, and then introduce and put it through the process. And then we get one additional bill draft in the first week of the legislative session. So for us, it's 6 maximum. For returning assembly members, they get essentially twice that. And then since the Senate has half as many members, everything gets doubled for them. So a returning senator has quite a bit of legislation that they can pursue if they want to. We have a lot more limited range. So, and we do get questions from constituents and from nonprofits and from folks in the business community asking if we can work on issues. And there are a lot of good issues that sometimes might only require a little change in the law, but especially as freshman members of the Assembly, we really have to pick what we want to focus on.
And these are bill draft requests. I mean, this isn't a practice run, correct? I mean, these are legitimate bills that will go through the entire review process. You sponsor, and you are then leading the charge, so to speak,
right.
once you get to legislation.
Right.
And one thing I just want to make clear is, again, we are part-time citizen legislators, so we have full-time jobs that we put on hold. We move up to Carson City for 4 months, plus the additional time spent in orientation and all the extracurricular meetings that Assemblyman Levitt was talking about. And we really wouldn't be able to do this without the assistance of staff. So the legislature has staff called the Legislative Council Bureau, and they help take our ideas and put them into polished policy language that we're able to work on. They have research staff that helps get us answers to questions that we have so that we don't have to spend all that time that we need to be working and earning an income, digging into, what are other states doing. So without those staff resources, we wouldn't really be able to do what we do. And we get to hire one staff member who serves as an attaché or a personal assistant to us. They also work part-time, so we don't have permanent ongoing staff that work for us. So when you send an email to the email address on the legislative website or you call that phone number, you're getting us.
Very important. And related to that, I want to talk about committees too. Is there a requirement as a freshman to be on a committee? I know all of you are on committees and subcommittees. Is that a requirement?
Yes, we're all on committees, and we have a say. We can request the committees that we would prefer. Usually we're assigned 3, minimum of 3, and I think pretty much all of us are on 3 committees. And you work within your caucus and then with the leadership to decide who's going to be on what committee. And you try to base them on your interests, some of the priorities that you have personally, so that you can work on that legislation, or possibly some of the bill draft requests that you want to get through so that you can be there to work on those as they go through the committees. So that's kind of the process of committees.
And I want to come back to the committee format too, because I know when you're on the floor, at least how I've read this, and help me out here, but when you're on the floor, you can have public comment. So if you are an engaged citizen, you can't comment there, but you can when you go to the committees. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
If you are an engaged citizen, how do you find out about when the committee meetings are, when legislative session starts, and all the details there?
Well, you can go to the website. The legislative website has all the meetings and when they're scheduled, and oftentimes they'll broadcast, and maybe all the time. I don't know for sure, but I think they broadcast them down south and up north. So you can actually make public comment via conference video call. And one thing about the committees that is neat is oftentimes you're assigned to committees that you had ideas for bill drafts, right? You had these ideas and you submit, well, I have these 10 ideas that I'm going to narrow down to 5, and then you get assigned to committees that you're interested in invested in. And so when I was put on growth and infrastructure, it was because that's what's important to me. And I was actually appointed as the minority chair of that committee, which I don't know if it has any power as minority chair or not, but it was important to me. You know, my background is transportation, so that's something that's important to me, and I know the value of infrastructure and growth in Nevada. And so if we can use that and be members that are participatory and that we can add something to the table, then I think that's the important thing to know is we're on committees that we can add value to. And I don't think any of us would have just kind of said, well, yeah, I'll do that committee even though I know nothing about it. You know, we really wanted to be invested in these committees. And
Yeah.
And you mentioned infrastructure, and I know a lot of our panel is on that one committee, correct? What are the shared values we have across the table here on how to build infrastructure, transportation, things like that?
I mean, I would say that I think on a wide variety of issues, and this just goes back to the point that I made earlier, it's not just a personal camaraderie that we've developed through freshman orientation, but in general, on probably 80% of the issues at least, we agree. And I think we all agree in all of these areas on the outcome that we're seeking in terms of improving access to and quality of healthcare for everyone, making sure every student in the state has a top-of-the-line education, making sure that we've got a modern transportation system and infrastructure. Now, we may have differences or disagreements on what we think is the best way to get there, and that's one of the benefits of the legislative process is that we all come together, and the committees are a key piece of that work where members of the public and other interested groups can come and share their opinions, we share our opinions, and then hopefully we figure out solutions that don't necessarily align with ideology, but again, get to what is the best thing for our state.
Yes.
On the eve of your first session, what are you anticipating your role is going to be? Is your role, you're part of committees, you have bill drafts, for the most part, is it a sit and observe and see how things work until the next session, or are you 100% fully engaged like an assembly member that's more seasoned?
I think it's probably both. We have a lot to learn, obviously, but I think we learn by doing, by being involved. As mentioned, we all have areas of expertise that we can share and we can bring to the table, but we can also learn from our colleagues, both freshmen and those seasoned legislators, that can help us learn the process, learn how to be good legislators. So I think it's both. And if you just sit back and do nothing, that's a disservice, I think, to your constituents and also to yourself. That's how we grow, put ourselves out there and look for those opportunities to grow and increase our knowledge. And so I think that's both.
Around the table, yes.
And I think the training and mentoring that we received helps with that, because if we had not received that training, we would be going up there blind, and we would probably spend at least the first 2 months trying to figure it out.
Right.
And so having that training is so valuable in helping us to hit the ground running a little bit. Now, granted, there's a lot that we have to learn about the dynamics of what happens and personalities, because we don't know all of our fellow legislators like we know each other. Mm-hmm. So I think that the training was so valuable in that aspect that we're able to go and do certain things rather than watch and then do. So I think that's an important thing to know.
And it's so vital now that there's term limits on assembly members, right? You don't have years and years of experience to then execute, right? So you need that orientation right away.
Can I just add on to that? Because
Yes.
it's interesting. If we sat and didn't do anything for 2 months, a lot of things people don't know is with respect to our own bill draft requests that end up becoming proposed assembly bills, and we'll get our little number at the end of it after the conversion from a bill draft request with the help of the Legislative Council Bureau's legal staff, we will get our actual proposed bills, which will become like assembly bill number whatever number we get. And we're responsible for making sure that bill gets through. If we waited 2 months, there's a midpoint. That 2 months would be our midpoint where the bill not only has to get through our committee, and I wanted to add on, is if someone is interested in testifying, they really need to testify at that first committee hearing before we go into work session. Once it goes to work session, that's where we'll be voting on that potential bill to get it out of committee. Because once it gets to committee, you still got to get it out of committee to the floor, and then it has to get off the floor up to the other house of our legislature to hopefully get to the governor's desk. And so one thing I wanted to add that I heard last night, because I just assumed all of our hearings would be aired at the Grant Sawyer building. Just in case, I'm sure some of the bigger hearings will take place both up at Carson and also the Grant Sawyer building, is to reach out. Each committee does have their own staff, and you can go onto the legislature website and find out who is the staff of each committee. So if there's a bill you're interested in, like my fellow colleague, Assemblyman Levitt, I'm obviously on judiciary as an attorney, reach out to that committee's section staff in order to make sure that that hearing is going to be aired at Grant Sawyer, so you can testify down here.
It's wonderful advice. Thank you so much. Thank you, panel, and we really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us this week on Nevada Week. For resources discussed on this show, for more information, we encourage you to visit our website. Also, if you have a topic or issue you'd like us to explore on Nevada Week, we'd love to hear from you. So please find us on social media or email us at nevadaweek@vegaspbs.org. Thank you again, and I'll see you on the next Nevada Week.